Like,
I just dig it, man. What can I say? I dig it. I don't know if it reminds me of some of the music on the old racing games or something. Like there's something to it. Like it hits something with me where I feel like it's very homey, reminiscent, nostalgia, something. I don't know where you pulled that from, but yeah, I dig it, man. I think it's perfect, a perfect intro to the RaceGuru Thunder Hour. So
yes,
bravo, man. Boom.
it's rocking and rolling. It's time for the Thunder Hour. Go
Thunder.
strike.
Hey, and you know what? I tell you what, it had to be loud and obnoxious in Vegas last week, Sean. I don't know how you felt going into the weekend. I was really excited because I wanted to, as much as I've knocked intermediate tracks, this car has been fantastic on these tracks, at least from a performance standpoint or show standpoint. It really has been good. I was looking forward for an intermediate race because honestly, I was kind of burned after 2 weeks of pack racing and hoping and praying to avoid the big one. I was excited to see some normal racing, man. What'd you think?
I thought Vegas overall was a pretty solid weekend. I think it delivered on the product overall. The racing was there, it was competitive, and even though it ended up being a dominance fest but in the end overall, it still had its fair share of action, and I can appreciate that.
You know, speaking of dominance fest, I don't want to break our arms patting ourselves on the back or anything, but we've been kind of dominant. We both were all over. People were asking us, and we took numerous questions in Discord, and we were all over Kyle Larson's the car to beat. And I know at this time last week, I wasn't as into that group. And let's be fair to us. We do this before practice and qualifying. And you and I talked about it on the show last week. And you were right. I was worried we weren't going to get enough practice time. We finally got good practice time. Like what we saw for practice times in the lap, we finally got the info and data that we haven't been getting the last couple of years. That was exciting, man. That made the weekend so much more fun for me. I can't even stand it.
Oh, definitely. Especially we were able to finally see some of these drivers go on these lengthy runs and be able to feel out their cars, make adjustments, send that feedback all out to their teams. It was a lot of data, and it was nice to just see all that in a race weekend, especially seeing, all right, this is what these teams have. This is what we're going to work on. Let's go.
Yeah, and there was plenty of action. Like you said, even though it was a fairly boring race up front for the most part, Tyler Reddick made it interesting at the end of every stage, including the race. There was a storyline playing out that was fun to watch. Unfortunately, I should say, the aero blocking is still a problem. You could tell Tyler Reddick in the interview he wasn't mad at Larson, frustrated. You could tell he's fully admitting nobody did anything wrong, but he was frustrated with the situation and that they couldn't really adapt or change to it. But hey, we were all over a lot of these things. And if you subscribe, go to fantasyguru.com, subscribe to Game Time MVP plan. All right. It's $74.99. You get NBA, NHL, soccer, MMA, PGA, racing, the NASCAR stuff with us, horse racing. I am sure I'm forgetting stuff. Did I say soccer? Soccer's, if it's not March Madness, football, or baseball, you get it. And you get all the content. You get Discord access. You get the DFS articles. You get the betting articles. So if you're not in a betting state, the DFS stuff is there. And our guys have been killing it on NHL and NBA, all of it. I mean, and it's 12 months. So you get all the way around. And don't tell anyone, but I believe it's still active. I'm not sure I'm supposed to give it out. Use the coupon code GAMETIME. One word, GAMETIME, for another $25 off. $50 for 12 months, Sean.
Wow.
Rob told me I could use it to one day, so I'm using it. Just saying.
What a deal.
I'm serious. $50 for all that? Like, look, if I already didn't have access, I'd go pay the $50. I'm just saying. Like, I don't know of a better deal in the entire industry to have all that access to Mincy, Ray, Ted, Jeff, us, Russ, Tyler, Armando, Chris Rose, Scott Bonder, Rob, Patio Joe. I know I'm going to Serge, Arnie. I'm going to be forgetting people, and I apologize. But you get lit with that subscription. You get access to all those folks. So come to Fantasy Guru. Check it out. Sean's articles have been killing it on the Cup and Xfinity stuff. We'll touch on my fire from the truck series a little later. But Don't
Maybe
miss
not
out.
too
We're
much
making money.
later.
What's that? Yeah,
Maybe
true.
not too much later, but go forth, go get the MVP all-in package. You get to see a lot of stuff from people who know what they're doing, as take it from others that know what they're doing. So go forth, get it, get all in. You'll be winning money. You'll be getting knowledge, become smarter. You basically get everything. So why not, right?
And if you don't win money, you actually have access to yell at us. I mean, where else are you going to get that? So, I mean, I'm just saying. But let's dig into. We talked about the Cup race a little bit. I got us a little out of order, so I apologize, Sean. But we did talk about the Cup race a little bit. There's any other names you want to mention? I mean, we mentioned Larson, we mentioned Reddick. Logano looked fast, but once again, he did not finish well. I mean, he's averaging a 23rd place finish through 3 races this year, but he's had the speed. So don't be sleeping on Logano. But what are some other names or takeaways that you wanted to bring up from last weekend?
So let's talk about the fact that the Toyota drivers were looking pretty good overall throughout the weekend, too. I mean, you mentioned Reddick there. He ended up finishing second, but the next highest Toyota finisher was in 5th place, and that was Ty Gibbs. Young Ty Gibbs. And then when you look forth at the rest of the top 10, you had 2 more Toyotas with Martin Truex Jr. in 7th and Denny Hamlin in 8th. I mentioned on the show last week that you should lock in a top 10 bet on Martin Truex Jr. That hit. So what did I tell you? I am going to take that one in stride because I mentioned that several times throughout last week's show, and it did hit. So there you go.
Not only did you mention it, we went back and forth, and you kept saying, Rich, I get it. Truex isn't ready to win yet. Take the top 10. Bet the top 10, sleep like a baby, and move on. And you were all over it. And to be fair, I did pivot, and it wasn't, I mean, you brought up valid points, but once we saw practice and everything, I did pivot away from Truex and was very open and honest about that, saying, look, the top 10, yes, Sean's all over that. I'm with him, but no, we're scaling back some of these, and we're putting our money elsewhere. And look, man, I had 5 kind of base bets out there. Out of the 5 I listed, 1, 2, 3 is how 3 of the 5 finished. Kyle Busch was back in 20th, but he was a top 5 car all day. And Christopher Bell cut a tire, got all the way back up to 10th, and then had problems again. But you had 4 out of the 5, if I recall.
Yeah, I actually called over Larson, Reddick, Blaney, and Chastain, which are all different winner bets that I suggested at different levels of confidence. So there you go.
We had you covered. I mean, seriously, I'm not trying to overbrag here, but I honestly, I talked to Adam Ronis today, and we were just talking about bets and units and some of these things. And he's like, Colin Winters in NASCAR is pretty tough. I agree. And we gave you a group of bets and had you at 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. I mean, I don't know how much better we can do, bro. I'm just saying. I mean, I'd love if Larson's odds were longer, but Ty Reddick was 1,400 and it was right there.
Oh, definitely, for sure. But I do also want to mention, piggybacking off of the Logano comments earlier, he did end up finishing in the top 10 after all in the 9th position. And he was one of only 3 Fords to finish in the top 10. As for mentioned, the Ryan Blaney was 3rd. But the other Ford that finished in the top 10, and this one was probably the surprise of the week, Noah Gragson in 6th.
Yes, sir. I feel like his name might come up a little bit tonight. Just a shot in the dark.
Yeah, you know what? I think I might have some confidence that he might be talked about a little bit more before the day is over there.
Little teaser for y'all. Little teaser. That was pretty surprising. And that's actually been, a back-to-back finish? Because he ran well at Atlanta, too. Didn't he finish top 10 at Atlanta?
I believe he did run pretty well at Atlanta as well.
For some reason, I remember it's a weird thing because of the penalty. Because the 10 team got a penalty, right? Or was it the 40? The 41 caught one.
Both of those teams did catch penalties.
Yeah. And I just remember seeing a stat. It was like there's still negative points, even though he's had like 2 top 10s or something like that.
Yeah, he's had 2 top 10s this season. This was actually his best finish of the year at Vegas, and the other top 10 was at the Daytona 500, where he also led Daytona. 5 laps.
Okay, so it was Daytona. I had Daytona, Atlanta mixed up. My apologies. I do that sometimes, ever since they started this whole crazy racing at Atlanta kind of thing. Well, should we move on to the Xfinity race? Because I don't want to get too much into Noah Gragson, because we really do have his name come up a couple of times a little later. So we'll cover a lot of that. Ford, I think, is probably disappointed with their run, to your point, although they did show the speed, right? So I think the nose helps. We'll see as we go throughout the year. We'll talk on the rules package changes that's coming up later for the upcoming weekend. And there were some interesting takeaways, at least from the news report that NASCAR released on it. And they were very clear that they did wind tunnel testing, specifically with all three cars and noses, trying to make sure there was no aero advantage. And I don't necessarily think there is, because we can sit here and knock Ford. Blaney was third, Reddick was second, Chevy was first. In NASCAR's dream world, that I might offend some people, that's a NASCAR wet dream for NASCAR management. The only thing that would make it better is that finish we had at Atlanta. If instead of having two Chevys, if it was a Chevy, Toyota, Ford, that's the only thing that NASCAR would love to see even more. The fact that all three manufacturers were in the top three, top five, that's a big deal in NASCAR's upper management world. And it's a testament, as much as I knock on this car, it's a testament to the car and what NASCAR's doing with it.
Oh, definitely. Even though Toyota was disappointed they couldn't be involved with that finish, I'm sure they had to be more than happy about the Xfinity race this past weekend and their dominance there.
Well, I mean, there's no shock, right? Joe Gibbs Racing and the Xfinity Series go hand in hand, but it's not fair to call it a snooze fest, is it?
I think it does have some validity, because it wasn't the most exciting race out there. There was a little bit of action towards the mid-pack, kind of like the Cup race, but I think the Cup race just did it better in that regard.
And it's interesting to me, because for the last probably 3 years, I've been adamant that the Truck and Xfinity Series are the better racing product as far as a fan experience and watching the race, the action, close finishes, lead changes, that sort of thing. And right now, through 3 events so far, I would argue Xfinity Truck kind of put on a dumpster fire, with all the accidents. But I still think that they're putting on a better show than what we're seeing from the Xfinity Series through 3 races. So I'm a little concerned in that regard, because it's been so great for so long, but hopefully it'll come around. But it was dominance, and maybe Joe Gibbs just has a little something that the rest of them don't, because as you note here, Chandler Smith and John Hunter Chandler won both stages, and then it was John Hunter and Chandler battling it out. And John Hunter, he was in a Joe Gibbs car last weekend, right?
Yeah, he's been in a Joe Gibbs racing car both this past weekend and the weekend before, and he's going to be in one this weekend too. So there you go.
But he can only do 5 events, right? 5 Xfinity events?
No, that isn't the case for John Hunter, just because he doesn't have 3 full years of Cup experience. So
that's right. Okay.
He can start in as many, as long as they aren't the Dash for Cash races or any of the playoff races.
But NASCAR does let other drivers partake in we'll see some Cup drivers like we did last year in the Xfinity race that aren't in their own championship. Like, I'm pretty sure if you're in the championship for Phoenix, for example, you can't race the Xfinity Series race. But I want to say there was a driver that was doing both races at the end of last year, because I remember commenting to a buddy, I didn't think that was allowed, but there must be some finite holes in the rules. Like, I knew there was the 3-year policy, but I didn't know necessarily all the other parts of it.
Well, that 3-year policy only applies to the Cup drivers. If you're a driver that's going from trucks to Xfinity, there's not really any limits of that sort of level there.
Right, but just for Cup going down, like Kyle Busch can only do 5 truck races this year.
Yeah, John Hunter hasn't even hit 3 full years of Cup experience yet. It's a little weird, considering that he had a gap for a little while of a few years since his first Cup season, but this is actually only his second full-time Cup Series season, so that over there means he technically still can participate in all those races.
Well, and I think we should touch on something for John Hunter from a DFS and betting standpoint. He is currently being looked at in the books and on the DFS websites as being a true rookie, and I would argue he's not. I understand that he hasn't had any real experience in this car other than a handful of one-off races here and there. But the fact that he does have some previous Cup experience, and I think the same can be said with Noah Gragson, even though he didn't race the full year last year. I fully expect these guys to produce a bit better than what Vegas and the DFS books are currently kind of rating them at. Just simply that I think they're discrediting, even though their previous experience, and I think the same is true for Ty Gibbs. Their previous experience hasn't been great. Like you go look at Ty Gibbs' runs last year, at least until 2/3 through the season, they left you wanting more. Noah Gragson was the same way. You look at John Hunter's previous races at Cup, it's the same way. None of those guys really started out on fire like we've seen from the Tyler Reddicks or, going back to Jeff Gordon's and things like that. So just something to keep in mind that right now is a good time for us to cash in on some values.
Oh, yeah, and I think that's going to start to come into play with some of these other races at all these differing track types, really. I think that's where we're going to start to see that come.
Oh, I think this last weekend and this weekend are perfect examples, right? I mean, as you pointed out, Ty Gibbs, 5th. Like, that was a really nice run for them, right? John Hunter, I think, had another top 10 finish.
Regarding John Hunter's finish this past weekend, he was 22nd.
Okay, my bad. But he did run well the first couple races, and he showed I don't know what problems he had, but I remember thinking, wow, he's running a little better today than I gave him credit for.
Yeah, at times he was actually running around the top 15. He just wasn't able to stick it and stay there. He fell back towards the end. He did finish on the lead lap at least, though, so he can say that.
Right. Maybe that's what it was, a lead lap. And Hocevar's quietly getting things done, and people really aren't talking about him.
Oh, yeah. Hocevar, he finished 15th this past weekend. Inspire Motorsports equipment that, even though it has gotten an upgrade, it's still Spire Motorsports now. It just goes to show, even with Hocevar having not that much experience behind the wheel, he's been doing pretty good.
Well, and for me, like I said, what really caught my eye, I liked him the Truck Series. I was worried that it was rushing him to jump him up to Cup. But then when I saw him take over Noah Gragson's car and do way better than Noah did in it, you couldn't ignore it. To me, it reminded me a lot of Joe Gibbs in the 11 car. They went through, excuse me, Jason Leffler, JJ Yaley, and I can't remember who else it was. Then they went to Denny Hamlin, and that first race Hamlin was in, all of a sudden that car went from being a 30th place car to top 15, like overnight. And to me, when you see things like that, that's driver. The teams don't typically make that big of swings or gains. When teammates are already kind of running up front and this one car is kind of lagging behind, they have the same equipment. They have the same technology. There's something else that's different. Communication, setup, comfort can all play into it. I'm not saying drivers can't be good enough, but when you see a driver hop in a car like that and perform significantly better, it's hard for me to not ignore them as a driver. And look at what Denny Hamlin's career has turned into, for example. I won't be shocked to see Carson Hocevar have a long, fruitful Cup career.
Oh, yeah, and going back to the whole Hocevar thing, you got to look back even towards the last few years because Spire was a two-car team for the past couple of years. Like the last 2 seasons, you had the 7 and the 77. The 7 has always been Corey LaJoie, but the last 2 years or so, that was Ty Dillon in that car, and that 77 was nowhere near where that 7 was running. But you look back even towards this past race, that 7 and 77 were racing against each other in the top 15. And that's just the big difference between Ty Dillon and Carson Hocevar, and just goes to show Hocevar is a wheel man, and he's knowing what he's doing.
You know what else this tells us? Because how many people have asked how come Ty Dillon was never at RCR, right? I think this tells us what we all didn't want to admit. Because both Ty and Austin coming up were really good at the dirt level. And as they came up through ARCA, and actually, I don't know if they came through ARCA. Maybe it was the Cars Tour. I'd have to go look. I apologize. But as they came up, they were winning. They were consistently winning all the time. And, of course, people are like, well, they had the best equipment. They're not the only ones with the best equipment. The Venturinis out there, they have the best equipment too. So there was definitely some skill there, but we've never seen this from Ty. Ty has never really done it. And look, he's back in the truck series. He's racing for War Rackley, where Matt DiBenedetto was last year. And so far this year, I haven't been pushing him. I haven't really been on him, and it's not burning us, Sean. It really isn't.
Nah, he's just been kind of there.
That's the best way to put it. Spot on. And
Pretty much.
speaking of trucks, or is there anyone else you want to highlight for Xfinity? Because it was, like I said, it was kind of it was the Joe Gibbs show.
I mean, what else can you say other than really Gibbs was dominating? Cole Custer was making a run at the end a little bit, but just didn't have enough time. Austin Hill finished top 5. Riley Herbst ended up rounding out the top 5 there. So Stuart Haas had a good day ultimately at Vegas in the Xfinity Series. So there you go. And probably the only other one that really kind of surprised me a little bit was Ryan Sieg. He finished 7th. I mean, but he did actually have a fairly fast car throughout the whole weekend and just kept it there. So other than that, there's really not much else to spotlight from the Xfinity race this past weekend.
And, Ryan Sieg's kind of been always half-assed on my radar, regardless if it's trucks or Xfinity, because he does always seem to get some speed. The equipment is rarely under him as far as durability and even speed is concerned. But again, he's one of those guys where if there's a teammate on the track, I can almost guarantee you Ryan is running noticeably better than whoever else is in the other vehicle. So I think it's a name worth mentioning. He's always a value play. It's not a guy that you're ever going to have to spend more than probably $6,700, maybe $7,000 on, something like that. So I think it's a name worth mentioning and keeping on a radar, because if we see him rattle off, a couple of top 10s or even top 15s at these intermediate tracks, look, they probably aren't going to qualify all that well. It's not like that team and car has a ton of raw speed. So he's going to be a potential value play almost weekly.
For sure, for sure. And even though RSS Racing has expanded to 4 cars, that 39 car that Ryan Sieg in particular drives is usually always noticeably faster than the rest of them. And it's interesting when you consider how few Fords there are out there in the Xfinity Series now, because you just have the Stewart Haas Racing Fords, you have the 4 RSS Racing Fords, you have the AM Racing Ford that Haley Deegan drives, and then not much else.
Nothing. Yeah, I know. And yet Stewart Haas doesn't even seem to have enough support to be up there and running with Joe Gibbs on a regular basis. It's kind of unfortunate. And maybe that's what we see this year in Xfinity, is just a lot of Joe Gibbs dominance. And I feel bad because my article, I totally spaced about Eric Almirola this upcoming week, which you'll touch on later. So my apologies. I need to update the article. But, I don't care if these one-off drivers are in these Joe Gibbs cars, the 18, the 19. What number is Chandler now?
The 81.
The 81. Thank you. We're going to have to watch them all. We are. I mean, I already talked about a couple in this week's article, but we're going to have to. I hope it doesn't turn into this, but it very well could be a Joe Gibbs racing show in the Xfinity Series this way, with a little bit of RCR and Stewart Haas mixed in.
And JRM, of course.
Oh, yeah. How can I forget JRM? I just feel like they've lost a step.
And a little bit of quality, too, especially on the road courses.
Oh, for sure, Dinger. But see, I think they've lost like 2 steps from when Dinger ran with them full time. Like I don't know what's gone on, but I definitely feel like the Chevys are chasing right now.
I think the Chevys, it kind of depends on the track, but as far as like the raw speed goes, I want to say that Ford and Toyota have them beat in the Xfinity Series for now.
I would agree with that, which is funny because JRM's basically been like Hendrick, right? In the Xfinity Series, just dominant. You can count on 1, 2, 3, or 4 of their drivers, kind of being there. And honestly, I mean, Allgaier's doing what Allgaier does, but the rest of the show has been very mixed at best, I would say.
Yeah, because you have Sam Mayer. At times, he's been probably the best car and driver there at that team. Then you have Sammy Smith, who's still just getting accompanied to driving a Chevy this year compared to driving for Gibbs last year. And then you have Brandon Jones, who's just trying to get his footing back after having a pretty mediocre season that last year, to put it at best.
Yes, I would. Well, between you and me, Sean, I think the only reason Brandon Jones is there is the sponsorship he brings.
That is the case.
He's an afterthought for me on that team. overall. I can't. I'm trying to pick my words because I don't want to be mean, but if the other drivers are A drivers, he's a C driver, in my opinion, as far as who's at JRM.
Yeah, I think Allgaier and Mayer are really the big standouts at the team. Sammy Smith is still building himself as it is. Brandon Jones, it depends on the track, really, because there are times, I want to say maybe at shorter tracks, he's actually been a little bit better than we give him credit for. But, but in other sorts of tracks, he just hasn't always had it.
Nope, I agree. I don't disagree at all. All right, well, can we talk about the truck race last weekend?
Yes, the truck race happened. There was action. Spire Motorsports ended up getting their third victory in a row, technically, because even though they have won the past two races, Rev Racing, who won Daytona, was also associated with Spire, so they've been hot here. But then the winner from this weekend was Raja Caruth. And I do remember you definitely had quite a bit to say about that this past week. So take it away, Rich.
Just like with Suarez, I was so adamant. The line was wrong. Wrong. I said it twice in my articles. We said it on here. I did not understand the 6,700 pricing on DraftKings. I did not understand the 8,000 or plus 8,000 80 to 1 bet. I didn't understand it. And where I was coming from was Spire was an upgrade in equipment. We know this. Even if Spire hadn't taken a step forward, and I think they have this year, it was upgraded equipment. Everybody was all over Kyle Busch. Raja was Kyle Busch's teammate. It's the same equipment. So if you're in on Busch, I don't know why you're not considering him. At 6,700, he was an afterthought. At plus 8,000, he was an afterthought. What really pissed me off, though, Sean, is I do all that time on the article. I break it all down. I'm building lineups around him. And, with the expectation, qualify 10th, 15th, something like that, right? I get home, I turn on qualifying, I turn on practice, and I'm loving what I'm seeing at practice times. Like things are matching up quite a bit with what we recommended on here and on the article, right? Things are fast. Great. We get to qualifying. My poor wife is outside in the garage. Raja gets the pole, and I start cussing up a storm up and down, throwing things and everything else. Like I went into Discord and was like, guys, I need a minute. I'm on tilt. Why? Right? Because part of the plan was getting value with Raja and taking advantage of moving up. With him qualifying first, that changed perspective on how chalky he would or would not be. At that point in time, I didn't know if he was still going to be a fairly chalky play. I assumed he was going to be somewhat of one, simply because at that price point, why not take a gamble on him, especially if he's 15th or something like that, right? When he's qualified first, now you're committing to either you expect him to be there, which we did, or you need him to be a dominator or something of that nature. And you saw in the Discord, a couple of guys were like, or someone was, I think I'm going to fade him. And I came back after I needed 20 minutes, guys and gals. I did. I took 20 minutes. I went outside with the dogs. I had a cigarette or two, came back and said, you know what? I've been pushing this dude for 2 years. I have faith in the talent. Sean and I have talked about Spire's improvement on all the series levels. Kyle's over there. He's brought, they bought into Kyle Busch. There's a lot to like about Spire specifically in the truck series. Why am I getting off him? At $6,700, even if he finishes 10th with the -9 points, he's worth the $6,700, right? Mm-hmm. Well, what really pissed me off, though, was Vegas got an out because now they moved his line 16 to 1. Still not, still longer odds, but Vegas, you got an out. Everybody should have been hammering that 8 plus 8,000, and you got lucky that you froze the lines and qualifying took place because you were about to get your ass handed to you. And I'm pissed about that. That's what really frustrated me. But Raja's what we said he would be. So I feel validated because I know I've been called out for some of my bias on him. But this is why, guys. I'm telling you, he's the real deal. And yes, I'm very proud of the 8,000 or 80 to 1 bet and the 16 to 1 bet and the core pick in the group. So I apologize. I'm gloating about it. But as my wife said, because she finally got frustrated and said, who's this guy your dick you've been sucking all day? I guess I'll bet on him. And she went and bet on him. So now that is what Raja is now known for in our house. He's the guy who's, I suck all day. So
what a way to put it. But you know what? You put the bet on it. You let everybody know it worked out. And just, you can take solace in knowing that he was what's a really, really deep bet, and he's never going to ever get
It's never going to be
deep
again, guys. Like, his price on DK, I will be shocked if it's less than 8,000 the rest of the year.
Same.
And that's what was frustrating, because at the end of last year, he had crept up to 75, 7,700. You know, that's why I'm sitting here going, what are you guys looking at? He's on a better team. Like, I'm more mad that Vegas got away with it, is really what pisses me off. They were so far off, and they got lucky as far. Because, look, if he qualifies 15th, how much does his line really move?
I mean, they would probably move it maybe towards maybe half of plus 8,000.
I would say plus 4,000, 40 to 1, something like that, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
they moved him
that
all the way up.
legit.
Right. Yeah. They moved him all the way up to the Tyler Reddicks of the world, right? I mean, anyway, yes. So I'm still kind of on fire about that one. But yeah, Sean, look, that's 2 weekends in a row that we've given you some really good returns. I mean, even if we didn't hit on all these other things, the units you should be up on those 2 bets alone are pretty. They would have paid for your membership plus. They should pay for numerous bets going forward. And look, Sean was all over it on Sunday. We both were in agreement on it. If you listen to either one of us, you took Larson. You may have bet the other guys too, but you took Larson and got that win and should have at least broke even or up a little bit. We hit some of the head-to-heads. So, man, if you guys didn't sign up till now, I'm sorry, because we're not going to get odds like that for the most part for the rest of the year on many of these drivers. Like, it's just not going to happen.
Yep. Instead, you might just see more of the Larson bets, pretty much like plus 500 or so. And it's like what I said last week about Larson. If anybody else is going to win at Vegas, they're going to have to go through Kyle Larson in order to do it. And
you were spot on. You were spot on, man. You said that on Thursday, and I was like, I don't know, these Toyotas. And then, hey, in all fairness, by Sunday morning, I was like, yeah, I'm with Sean. If it's not Larson, it's 1 or 2 of these other guys. I mean, I think I even said, if you're going to pin me down, I want Larson, Byron, Reddick, I believe was the group I listed. I wish Blaney had been in that group too, obviously. But, and really, if Byron doesn't run into a trash bag, and I read somewhere a beer can was stuck in the radiator.
I did not read about that, but I could believe that. That would be quite something.
I mean, the engine temp jumped to 350, just so folks know how ridiculous that is. And I didn't know that the new car has like some sort of fail-safe shutdown kind of mechanism that Kevin Harvick alluded to. But folks, 220 is about where 220, 240 is about where they want to be. When they get over that, they do not like that. The motors don't like that. The teams don't like that. That's bad. The fact that it didn't blow water at 351, I don't know what they're doing different with the system, because that never would have happened on the old car and the old system. And 2, I am shocked they were able to get him in the pits, get the bag off, and complete the race. And did he not finish somewhere like 10th or 11th?
He snuck into the top 10 at the end at 10th position there. So
again, we weren't that far off on Byron either. So anyway, subscribe at fantasyguru.com. Use game time code for the coupon. Get $25 off the $75. $50, 12 months. You get all of this. And I mean, seriously, if you would have put a $1 bet on Daniel Suarez when we told you to, and Roger Caruth when we told you to, you could have lost $30 other, still paid for your membership, and still had enough money to take the special someone out to dinner for steak and lobster.
Steak and lobster. Good call.
Dude, I'm just saying. All right. Well, now we covered the race. Should we cover we should name this segment something like the news and review or NASCAR. I'll have to come up with a name, because it needs to have some sort of funny play, because NASCAR news is always just goofy. You know what I mean? Like, nowhere else you're like, Will fell off. We suspended 2 crew members. They dropped the ball. I mean, it's like, imagine if the mouthpiece comes out of a football game, or the earpiece comes up. Oh, safety. We had to suspend the equipment manager for 2 games. Sure. Okay. Whatever. So why don't you break down the penalties for this week?
So while there were some penalties in the Xfinity series for lug nuts, those only resulted in fines for about 2 teams or so. But the big penalty this week is the Chris Buescher penalty, and that's just because ultimately 2 crew members, the jackman and the front tire changer, are suspended for 2 races, which are Phoenix this weekend and Bristol next weekend, just because the wheel came detached during the race during green flag action there. So usually this is not a penalty that's new. We've seen this kind of penalty before, especially since the next gen car was introduced in 2022. But this was the first real case of it happening in a cup car this season. So it is notable to point out it took us 3 races to get there, but here we are. We got a wheel that came loose just because the lug nuts weren't tight, and boom, Buescher ended up being out of the race, and 2 of his crew members are gone.
It's meant to be a big penalty because obviously it's a big safety thing. And for people wondering, because I saw this question on Twitter from someone, they're like, well, I get the front tire changer. They're the one that didn't get the lug nut on. So why is the jackman also at fault here? Typically speaking, at a pit stop, the driver goes on one of 2 signals, okay? If it's a real crowded pit lane, if they're doing fuel only, something like that, someone on the pit box, usually the crew chief, sometimes the spotter, but usually the crew chief will say 3, 2, 1, go, or go, 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 or wait on my command. And they'll wait for the gas man to, give the thumbs up. They put enough in or whatever it is, and they go. The other way to do it is you go on the drop of the jack. Like you'll hear them on the radio all the time. Go on the jack, go on the jack. When the jack drops, go. So the jack man has to understand, and you'll see them sometimes. You'll see the really good ones catch things. You'll see them look, and then they stop. Like they're about to let go, and they're waiting, and you'll see the tire changer jacking with it, trying to get going. It's on the jackman oftentimes to let the driver know they're good to go. Jackman dropped, and you could see on the video, they were still trying. They knew they didn't get it on. They were trying to do it, and he let it go. The car took off, and that's what happened with Kyle Busch last week. The difference was Kyle Busch got back around without actually losing the tire. Had he lost the tire, it'd been a whole different story, but he got back around without losing the tire.
Yeah, that is so.
And then, in a fate of irony, Bubba Wallace went 12 laps down because they couldn't get the lug nut off the tire. They actually had to cut it off.
Yeah, the lug nut was on too tight, which is the opposite of Buescher's case where it was too loose.
I just couldn't believe I've never seen him cut off a lug nut before like that, man. That was interesting.
Very interesting because I've never seen anything quite like it since my time watching NASCAR.
I've seen Dale Earnhardt wipe the windshield while driving down the front stretch. I have seen Dick Trickle light a cigarette at Bristol. I have seen Kyle Busch and Mark Martin run over a TV cable that injured a fan. I have seen some crazy things, and yet I have never actually seen them cut off a lug nut. So, but speaking of interesting things, Dodger Stadium, Sean? I thought this was a NASCAR podcast.
Well, I guess we're going to become baseball reporters now. Guess we should call this the Baseball Guru Thunder Hour. Oh, wait. Actually, you know what? Maybe we should get Ray Flowers to help with that one.
Well, I know you brought up very good points. I'll be frank. I think it's gimmicky. I think it's silly. But you and I talking off air, texting, whatnot, you hit on the facts, the truth. Jeff says it all the time on air. People don't like the truth, and I'm learning that too. It seems like when you tell the truth or speak facts and people don't like the outcome of those facts, right? It's just an unfortunate thing. They don't want to believe it. But the truth of the matter is NASCAR clamors and wants so badly to have some sort of significant stake in New York, Chicago, and LA. They are adamant that the only way they're going to grow and become mainstream or whatever it is they're looking for is they need a presence in these huge media markets. That's why we're doing the street race in Chicago. It's why there's constant discussions about what we can do in New York, even though Watkins Glen or Pocono, is only an hour and a half, 2 hours away. I'm with you, Sean. I think this is gimmicky. I don't like the idea of paving fields to tear up pavement, to put fields back together, to tear them up. And I'm just seems so stupid to me when we have so many great racing venues that put on good action all over this country. But because it's not a cool backdrop, because it's not going to hold 80,000 fans that can't see crap, and we're only going to get 10,000 or 20,000 there anyway, because it's not in downtown LA or New York or Chicago, they're not interested. And they're going to do. I'm with you, Sean. I think it's going to happen. They want to stay in LA, whether we like it or not. Something like this is going to happen.
So for context, basically there's reports going around that NASCAR is in talks with those people, those that are representing Dodger Stadium, in order to maybe host some races there. Now, to the report's credit, they have not mentioned if this will be a points-paying race or if it's going to be the replacement for the Clash. But considering that the Clash at the LA Coliseum was supposed to run for 3 years on their contracted deal, and this is the 3rd year of that deal, I'm thinking that maybe they're looking at Dodger Stadium as a potential replacement venue-wise for the Clash overall. So that's where this is coming from.
That's it. I have the exact, and I apologize. I didn't. I buried the lead. That's exactly where I'm coming from, and I think Sean has it nailed. So, but I don't want to get on a tangent how stupid this is or anything else. I already did that. Can we talk some fun stuff, Sean?
Yes, let's get into the fun stuff.
All right, man. So, paint schemes. What do you got for me this week, man? I want to see what you got.
All right, it's paint scheme time, and the first of the 2 paint schemes that I ended up picking for this week is Ryan Blaney's Advanced Auto Parts scheme. Blaney's ran the Advanced Auto Parts scheme for a couple of years now, but they changed around the Advanced Auto Parts logo, and the way that the stripes looked on the bottom is a little bit different. And overall, I just really love the way that they did this scheme because it's simple, but also very effective, and it just looks fast. Love it.
I'm so glad you picked this one because I was very close to picking this one. This is one of those that caught my eye. This is the exact type of style that you've heard me talk about, Sean, that I love. And it almost reminds me a little bit of the old Miller Lite black and yellow car.
Oh, the genuine draft car.
Or the MGD one. Yeah, I'm sorry, not Light. MGD one. Yeah.
Yeah, the one that was famously driven by Rusty Wallace in the 90s.
Correct. It was a little different. They ran a couple of special schemes with a bigger yellow stripe like that. Never a red number that I know of. But it was more, that one was more all black with just kind of a border on it. But it kind of gave me that same feel. I agree with you. I think this is a fire scheme.
Very much a fire scheme. And you know what? I think there's a good chance we might be seeing a lot of this scheme this weekend, considering the driver behind it and this driver's history. But we'll get into that later.
Yes, sir. So what you got for number 2? Because I can't lie, man. I'm glad these are 2 that you picked. I'm really glad because this was another one that I was really close to picking.
All right. So as for the second scheme that I ended up choosing this week, it was Kyle Larson's Valvoline scheme. Look at this thing. Valvoline is a classic sponsor, but I think this is definitely one of the best schemes that I've seen them put out ever since they started aligning themselves with Larson. The white, the red, the blue. It's very colorful. It pops. It's very clean. I really like how it just looks overall, and I think it's just going to stand out on race day.
I do too. I like the white on top. From the side view is really where I think it pops, in my opinion, the way they've done it. And I think this is the best Valvoline paint scheme we've seen since the Mark Martin one, where they had the blue and red that kind of split and then kind of merged, at the end. It was almost
yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Yes. To me, this is the best one since then.
That is high praise considering that there's been a couple of really good Valvoline schemes over the years. I still remember the days in the 2000s with those Valvoline schemes with the Johnny Benson and Scott Riggs. Those were also some awesome looking schemes too.
They were good schemes. The problem is the cars never ran well, so they don't pop in my memory. But you're right. Those were good, especially the Scott Riggs one, if I remember correctly.
Oh, definitely. So let's get into your choices now, Rich. Let's see. Right. What do you got this week?
So the first one was, I thought it might shock people, but it turns out Sean was a fan too. Justin Haley. Very, in all fairness, it's not that really different, I guess, from Blaney. Very similar, very simple. I just think this looks really sharp, man. I like the way the sponsorship on the door, it works with the color scheme. I like the black and the charcoal with the yellow. I just think this looks absolutely fantastic. To your point, Sean, it looks fast.
Oh, yeah. I have to agree with this one just because overall the sponsorship really sticks out and it's a nice contrast with the bright number there, too. With the yellow outlines, the number
Yep.
51. And overall, it's a very fast looking scheme. Like when I think about paint schemes that will pop out, I think this is going to be one of the ones that are going to stand out on the track overall.
That's fair.
So let's get into your second choice, shall we?
Now, in all fairness, I'll be honest. I don't even know if the design is my favorite. All right. But my favorite colors are green and orange. And it is not often you see green and orange on race cars. You don't really see it often. You got the Miami Hurricanes that kind of sport the green and orange. I'm not a big Hurricanes guy, but I did have some Miami Hurricanes stuff as a kid because it was green and orange. Noah Gragson in his green and orange Serve Pro car.
This one.
I get it. It looks like it's straight from the 70s, but I kind of appreciate it, man. I think they could have done, if it was my design, I would have tweaked some things on this. I think I could have made it really pop a little bit better. I don't like how the hood and the fenders are so contrasting. I feel like there would have been a better way to kind of merge those, if you will, maybe extend the green up the nose or something. But I'm going with Noah Gragson this week. And maybe it's just because I've got a funny feeling about Noah Gragson.
Maybe, but you know what? As for this scheme, I'm not as much of a fan of this one. I'm just going to come out and say it. Even though I like the fact that it's a brand new sponsor with Serve Pro, I just think that the green and orange is just the way that the colors mix. If one of them was like a darker tone of green or orange, I think that I would like that more. Just because it would make it give that contrast instead of it being kind of like a mishmash of colors. But overall, it's an okay scheme. But when I think of green and orange schemes and I think of the number 10 schemes, I think of schemes like this in particular. How's that for a throwback there, Rich? Because it's also green and orange, and it's also the number 10 car.
I hated that one, man. I just like. It's the worst color orange and the worst color green, I guess. I'm with you on the Serve Pro one. I wish it was a darker, more like an M&M kind of Kelly green. The problem is that Serve Pro's colors. Like that's just the nature of the beast on that one, because I did the same thing. I'm like, I tweaked the orange a little, I tweaked the green a little, but that's Serve Pro's colors. So unfortunately, as long as Serve Pro's on the car, we're going to get some sort of match of those two colors of green and orange. Kind of like we did, those GoDaddy cars, man. You want to talk? I mean, that screams like late 90s, early 2000s. Ugh.
But when I do think of green and orange cars that are the number 10, I can't help but think of the old Danica Patrick GoDaddy schemes. I just cannot help but think of it.
I never really liked those. Maybe it's the logo. It just looks so. I just never could get into that one, man. Never could.
And this, in my opinion, is one of the better GoDaddy schemes, too. So,
it wouldn't shock me, Sean. It really would. I know I did not like any of the GoDaddy and the Hanna-Barbera cars I used to mock all the time. I just thought they looked chintzy, man. They looked like little. Look, kids, we want kids involved, so I shouldn't knock it, but they just look like little kid paint schemes to me. I guess I don't know another way to put it.
Well, it got them into the sport, and that's ultimately the goal they were trying to go for with that. But the GoDaddy scheme, on the other hand, that's something, about website domain names, and that's not something exactly for the kiddies there.
No, it's not. And look, to Danica's credit, I was dating a woman at the time. She had a daughter, and her daughter just hated the fact that her mom would go to a race with me or would watch racing with me or something like that. Oh my God, it's so stupid, blah, blah, blah. Well, she got to meet Danica Patrick. Then she was all excited. Well, I took her to a short track race at the dirt track there in Concord. She got to experience her first race car driver fight. So she got kind of hooked between Danica and that, because it was so funny. There's the accident. I think the guy went at Sammy Swindell, if I remember correctly. I can't remember who the other driver was. So anyway, he gets out of his car and they're stopped on the track. So he's running across the infield and he's kind of jogging. She's like, "Where's he going?" I said, "I think he's on his way to tell somebody he's not real happy with them." And then, of course, you see the officials start going. They're running after him. She's like, "What are they doing?" I said, "Well, I think they're a little worried that this might turn into maybe some fisticuffs." She goes, "Fisticuffs?" I said, "I'm not sure it's just going to be yelling and screaming." She goes, "Are they going to fight?" I said, "They might. I don't know. He's not getting out of his car, so I hope he doesn't punch him in the helmet." "Oh, I bet that would hurt." I said, "Yeah, it probably would hurt his hand, but I don't know." But she was hooked then, right? Because we saw the car flip. Dude gets out, so nobody's worried about it. He's running over there, and now so it's like between Danica and this, all of a sudden we created a new race fan. So for all the flack Danica gets and whatnot, and Haley Deegan for that matter, I'm of the opinion I would love to see a more successful female racer because I do think it really does help the fandom and helps the connection. I'll never forget the Bristol race I was at, and I had to take the picture of the kid. Kid was Kyle Busch won. Kid couldn't have been more than 8 years old, man. Decked out in Kyle Busch stuff, a whole sign, the Candyman, the whole deal. And, he's surrounded by these grown-ass adults booing and doing the thumb thing and all this. And I'm just like, "Kid, come get you some, man. You get that win all over you, dude." I was trying to flag down Kyle, be like, "Give him the flag. This dude deserves the flag." Because we weren't far from the start-finish line. So I'm all about bringing the kids into it, man. So if paint schemes do it, great. Drivers do it, even better. So I don't think
What more can you ask for?
Nothing. Well, let's dig into Phoenix here before we get too late. Sean, in your opinion, what do you think we should expect from Phoenix this weekend?
Well, Phoenix, overall, we got ourselves basically a short, flat track there. It's a 1-miler. Ultimately, with this sort of track, you're going to want to have some dominators into your lineups just because this is the sort of track where, kind of like Las Vegas, if you're out front, you can be able to get from the field a little bit and stay there. I wouldn't say it's as you wouldn't be able to stay out in the front as much as Las Vegas, but it's still something that you have to be notable of. And with these shorter tracks, you have to also keep in mind that drivers getting lapped is going to be a big theme when it comes to this week's race, just because it's so much easier for a driver to get lapped compared to other tracks. But we should also be able to see, hopefully with the new revised rules package, our fair share of passing within the Cup Series race overall, and that could lead to some potential place differential play as well. Whereas the Xfinity and trucks, it's going to be action. We're definitely going to get our fair share of action in those two series for sure.
Well, we got no trucks this weekend, right? So,
well, yeah, but the trucks will race there in the fall, of course, for the championship.
Well, I would say they'll be there for the end of the year, and you're right. They're gonna put on a great show. Speaking to your point about the Dominators, I'm trying to find it now, but I believe the winner in last year's event led 92 for Xfinity, led 92 of the 200 laps. I'm having a hard time reading here. Maybe it was last year's spring race. Let's see. I might have been looking at last year's spring race. Let me pull that up because I tell you what, Sean, I can't read anymore, man.
Yeah, it was 92 laps in last year's Xfinity race in March. That was done by Sammy Smith.
Sammy Smith, who, to your point, Sammy Smith was at Joe Gibbs, and I did not mention this in the overview article, but I will when I dig into the Xfinity article. Sheldon Creed is in that car now. And now that I think about it, his odds were a little bit longer. They were down in that 1,400 range, I think. That's a name we should probably mention for the Xfinity series for this weekend.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You have to really like Sheldon Creed for this weekend at Xfinity, just because you look back at his past finishes. He's made 5 starts. 4 of those were top 10 finishes, and the last time that he went to Phoenix, that was his best career finish at the Xfinity level at Phoenix because he was the runner-up and he led 4 laps. So
right.
That should say a lot right there.
Yep. I was really looking for Sammy Smith, but I forgot he had made that change to JRM, man. I saw the 8 and assumed 18 because I knew he was in the 18 last year. And I had to go pull up the entry list. I was really looking forward to Sammy Smith. And the more I sit here and think, the more I'm going, Sheldon Creed's the bet to make. So, but we should be talking Cup here. I apologize, Sean. I got us on an Xfinity tangent, and that was not my point. My point was to mention for the Dominators, when you got someone that leads almost half of the total laps available, that's a big deal.
Oh yeah, definitely for sure. And that has been the case in some of the more recent Cup races as well, where there's been a couple of Dominators out there in play. I mean, look back at the race in the fall. Ross Chastain was the Dominator. He led 157 laps. You look back towards the March race of last year, the Dominator ended up not winning the race, but that was Kyle Larson leading 201 laps before finishing fourth. But the driver that did end up winning in last year's March race at Cup was William Byron, and he still led quite a few laps with 64.
Well, and I think that's worth pointing out, Sean, even though Kyle Larson got fourth, I bet you he was still the top scorer that day for DFS.
Probably.
I mean, when you lead that much, this is what we were kind of talking about last week or 2 weeks ago when I said I have to personally change my thinking. Having that Dominator, we take pride in saying, we called 4 of the 5 top 5, right? But for DFS purposes, let's be honest, that doesn't mean poo. The top scorer could be someone that started 20th and finished 5th. Top scorer could be someone that started 5th, led 3/4 of the race, and finished 8th. I mean, I remember one year cashing in a major contest with Martin Truex. He finished 6th, I want to say. It wasn't even a top 5 because there was a late, like he was leading. There was a late stop at the end of the race, fuel only, something like that. He came out 10th or something, whatever it was. But point being was he had dominated and had so many fast laps that he scored all by himself almost 100 or 111 points, where even though he didn't win the race, he was literally 20 points ahead of the next guy that had the most points, or 30 points. So
yeah,
we have to hit these Dominators. When they happen, we have to hit them, or we're not going to cash. And so, at least for me and folks out there, start thinking in terms of points for DFS. Start thinking in terms of places for betting. It is 2 different types of thinking, and I think we need to keep that in mind at times.
Sometimes they do go hand in hand overall, just because sometimes the Dominator ends up being the race winner and they end up leading the most laps anyway. I mean, you take a look at the November Fall Championship race where that was the exact case with Ross Chastain. But you got to just be able, when you're thinking of DFS, you want to think of finish position, you want to think of leading laps, and just picking the drivers that are going to get you the best possible finish overall.
And I also like looking for the fast ones, right? Because you get 0.45 for the fastest laps. Here again, when you only do, say, at a road course where there's only 80, right? Or you go to Daytona, for example, that's 200. Then we come here and we're running 312. So when you think about the total points pool, those fastest laps and Dominators, yes, you need them at the road courses, but the difference in position, the place differential points are bigger at places like Daytona and even the road courses, because you don't have the opportunity for those Dominators to put up as many, because you're getting fractions points, right? You're only getting 0.25 to lead in the lap. You're only getting 0.45 for the fastest laps. That's why I like chasing it's hard to chase fastest laps because you don't know till the race is over unless you're watching the live loop data. But based on practice, like Sean and I have said, we usually put you on the fast cars, and a lot of times that fast car leads laps, plus is the fastest laps, and that's where we're going to get our points, especially at these short tracks, right? Bristol, we will not be shocked to go to Bristol, Sean, and someone lead 250 laps, right? They may not win, but if you just led 250 laps, think about that from a bonus standpoint. Take a quarter, so 100, I can't even do math in my head, 100 points basically. Something like that.
If you lead 400 laps, you're going to essentially get just 100 points from that or so.
Right. So 250 laps, so it would be 100 points. I can't do math, man. I don't know why I'm struggling so bad. 250 times 0.25 be 50 points, right?
I do think, though, that despite there being the revised rules package for short tracks, though, our strategy is going to have to remain similar just because of the type of track it is. And
I agree.
this is just a higher lap count than all the past 3 weeks combined, pretty much. 312 laps versus the most I want to say was Las Vegas last week, but it just doesn't compare. You need to have drivers that lead laps this week. There's just no way around it when it comes to DFS. Betting, you want to focus on just the drivers that can win, of course.
Right.
But
or top 5 or whatever you're betting. But where I was getting at, Sean, you lead 250 laps at Bristol. Rich, we will go to Bristol. Martinsville's 500 laps, same thing. That's 62.5 points. There is no way to make up place differential more than more or less 30 points. All right, 32. I mean, you could start dead last and win, so 35 bonus points, something like that. That's the most you can get from place differential. Run 100 laps or lead 100 laps at Phoenix, that's 25 points. That's about what you can expect from a place differential. So this is where I'm kind of harping the leading, the fast cars, and I'm with Sean. The strategy is still the same. I mean, we need to have a mix, but as Sean mentioned earlier, lap traffic is going to be a thing this week, and that has not been a thing for the last 3 weeks.
definitely. And in particular, where that's going to matter more than anything is with FanDuel lineups in particular, just because FanDuel actually counts laps completed. And with that in mind, if you have a driver that keeps finishing several laps down, well, that's going to make a big difference in determining from you finishing first compared to, say, you finishing around 50th or so. And that could be a big swing in some contest.
Absolutely. You mentioned the short track package. Do you want to highlight kind of what we should know just about it? I mean, my takeaways are very simply the drivers are hoping it's more responsive. Goodyear is saying they're bringing a tire that is going to have wear and grip, which I think is absolutely what we need. Beyond that, it's a lot of science, lingo, mingo that I just want to see it in action.
Yeah, the whole idea of the changes to the rules package is supposed to basically reduce downforce, so that way the way that the cars can aero block each other will not be as effective, and thus, as a result, can lead to more passing and basically drivers being able to make more moves. Because we've seen with this next-gen car within the last 2 years, if you just have the track position, you remain out front, you're more than likely going to stay there and just dominate. NASCAR's hoping in order to reverse that starting with this week and see how the rules package goes, just so hopefully drivers can be able to move through the field, make passes, and not just basically be 5 miles faster than the cars ahead of them just to make a move. You should just be able to make a move just from your racing line, or just be able to even do a small bump and be able to actually get to the driver's bumper there. So that's what they're looking for.
Tyler Reddick would love to see it, right?
Definitely.
Well, and I read too that they're hoping, because of, like you said, the change in the downforce and the impact on the splitter, they're hoping, they said not a ton, but drivers should be able to kind of slide and get the car a little bit. They should be able to maybe push the car a little further before getting too far. And they're hoping this reads the better action as well. So I'm going to reserve judgment. I have my doubts, but I'm going to reserve judgment until we see it this weekend. And as we mentioned, Sean, I think this weekend, along with Richmond, is really going to get us a great taste. Bristol and Martinsville are kind of their own animals. Bristol's faster, and Aero has come into play there. Martinsville, it's such a braking thing. I don't know how much Aero really mattered anyway. So I'm really curious to see. I fear that the changes are going to work well here in Richmond, and I fear they won't have an impact on Martinsville is kind of where I'm at, I guess.
But we'll be able to see over the next 2 weeks here, because we got Phoenix this week and we got Bristol the next. So we're not going to be done talking about this package just so soon.
And I think it's smart that they're running back-to-back short track races with this package, right? Because it's going to be fresh in people's mind. Kind of same concept. Things they've learned this weekend, we'll definitely see, even though they're completely different tracks. Folks are going to learn stuff. Teams are going to learn things on the cars and what's working, and we're going to see some of that carry over to next week. So I'm with you. It's a lot of newness. Again, like Sean and I always harp, practice, get in the Discord, go to fantasyguru.com, get signed up for the membership. We got so many options. get signed up for the membership, and we will point you in the right direction. Don't believe us? I don't know what to tell you, man. We got documented bets all over the place. I'll send you screenshots of the articles and the bets we post if you want. But moving on to some of our core plays this week, Sean. Well, I guess we should why don't you go ahead and cover some notable entries, because they do matter. This will matter.
So let's just start by discussing some of the top price drivers and some of the drivers that we feel we got to talk about this week. And it starts all the way. We're going to go forth and talk about the 12th car, the Advanced Auto Parts scheme, Ryan Blaney. Blaney, in my opinion, I think he is going to be the driver that you're going to have to beat this week in order to get that win. Like I said with Larson last week, Blaney, this is a really, really strong track for Ryan Blaney. And he's been very good here in the last couple of years, despite never winning at Phoenix within that time frame. But he's been highly consistent, and he's always been in the hunt in recent races at Phoenix. And let me just tell you this. Did you know, Rich, that Ryan Blaney is one of only 2 drivers in the past 6 races to place in the top 10 of every Phoenix race in that span?
I did not know that. I had some other fun stats I wanted to share on Blaney, though, but I did not know that one.
He only shares that statistic with one other driver, a driver that is recently retired, Kevin Harvick.
Interesting. Well, what really impressed me, and just so folks know, Sean and I do kind of get together with each other before the show just to kind of go over things, kind of get warmed up. But we do this show sheet independently. Okay. So I don't know what Sean's picks are necessarily. He doesn't know what my picks are. So just as a little, I don't want to say warning, because it's kind of more of a hat tip. When Sean and I overlap, you should probably listen. Just saying. We don't always overlap. We don't always disagree. But when we overlap, I'm telling you, you're cooking with fire. And I agree with Sean. Where we sit today, Ryan Blaney is already my pick to win this week. He has finished second in the last 3 consecutive Phoenix races. In the 4 races in this car, he has never finished worse, or he's never finished outside the top 5.
Never finished worse than 4th in particular.
Right. He was 4th in 3 seconds. Okay. And we just discussed how the Fords probably got just a smidge better. Well, a smidge better is the difference in Ryan Blaney having a win the last 2 years. So I'm with Sean. I'm in 100% agreement. Ryan Blaney's the guy to beat. And I have a feeling he's going to say something similar about our next guy, because we overlap here too.
So the next driver that I'm going to get into here is William Byron, and that's last year's March Phoenix winner. He led 64 laps of this race. He's finished 6th or better in the last 3 Phoenix races. William Byron, Willie B, this is a track where he's shown that he's pretty good at. And Hendrick Motorsports, I think Ford right now is the top manufacturer to beat at Phoenix. That for some reason, I think the Fords just have the edge when it comes to these shorter tracks. But Hendrick with Byron there, I think that's one team that could really take it towards these Fords. And Byron proved that last year with the March win. So he's won the watch right there.
I don't disagree. I'm in 100% lockstep with you on Byron, so I don't really have many more to say on that. We overlap on another guy. I don't know if you want to talk about Ross first here, Sean, but we overlap on Ross Chastain. So why don't you give me, because you brought up already some good points on Ross Chastain earlier in the show.
So Ross Chastain, pretty much, he's another one of those drivers that we have to watch, and I think he's another Chevy driver that could take it towards these Ford drivers. And Ross did exactly that by winning the November race, which is the last race at the track currently. And he did so in dominating fashion, leading 157 laps. But that overall doesn't tell the whole story of how Ross has done since joining Trackhouse Racing in 2022, basically when the next gen car also premiered. He has 3 podium finishes, 3 top 3 finishes at Phoenix since joining Trackhouse. And the one time he finished outside of the top 3, that was the race when he was all set to finish inside the top 10 until basically him and Denny Hamlin got into it, and that ignited their rivalry again overall, and he finished 24th, but he was running pretty well in that race too. So Chastain, he's one of the absolute best picks that you have to keep your eye on this week.
I wasn't far off on your fourth pick here. I just went a slightly different direction, and it's kind of more of a gut shot. I liked what I saw this past weekend. I know he ran well here in the spring race last year. But you're more on the Kyle Larson side. I'm on the Tyler Reddick side. Go ahead and look, you don't have to sell me on Kyle Larson. I get it. It's more of we're only going to pick 4, right? I can't have a 5th one in here. I like to be a little different. And I'm not a big fan of leaning on guys to win back-to-back events.
While I do think it's true because it's pretty hard in order to win back-to-back, I think Larson is one driver that I think has the capacity in order to actually get it done this week. Just because, like I mentioned, Hendrick is very, very good at this track as well. Larson in particular, he has a lot of top 10 finishes at this track, Phoenix. And when you look back towards some of his recent finishes, go all the way back since about November 2018. That's the last 10 races. Only one finish outside the top 10. And you also have to remember, Larson dominated this March Phoenix race last year, leading at 201 laps. So if Larson is going to go back-to-back, I think he has the potential to do so with Hendrick just being a great team at this track. And not to knock at Tyler Reddick, I think I like Tyler Reddick as well this week, just because even though I didn't put him within my 4 there for this first group just because he hasn't been as consistent as all these other drivers, but he's still worth mentioning just because Tyler Reddick, he did finish 3rd in the last 2 March Phoenix races. It's just the November Phoenix races where he kind of just did not finish even close to that same margin.
And I don't know what the difference is between the two. I mean, obviously seasonal, but temperature-wise, I don't, it's early, it's late, fall, so I don't know how much that changes. I did find his inconsistency interesting, but I think overall, he's worth it to take a look at. Well, let's kind of fly through some of these sleeper and mid-tier options. How do you feel about that, Sean?
Let's get into some of the mid-tier drivers first here. So starting out with the mid-tier drivers, this was one of the drivers that we both had on our list to talk about today, and that's Chase Briscoe. The number 14 Stewart-Haas Racing driver, Phoenix, this is one of his best racetracks. It is the site of his only Cup Series win. He also has 3 top 10 finishes in recent events at the track. Briscoe, I know he's kind of mixed when it comes to his results on different tracks, but 3 top 10 finishes within the last 4 races, and he's led in 3 of the last 4 Phoenix events. He's one that we're going to have to keep our eye on this week, because especially when you consider Stewart-Haas Racing, even though not all of their teams have been in sync, they've shown some speed already at times this season, and that's something that we have to kind of pay attention to.
I agree. He's been so inconsistent. In fact, I stumbled onto when I was digging into stuff. I had, I go through the media booklet, right? And there's all these cool stats in there, but you got to be careful because it's typically career. It has all these other things. So then I'll go into some of our other spots that we like to go to and look at all those things. And all of a sudden I look and I'm like, holy crap, Chase Briscoe, are you like part owner here at Phoenix? Like, you're not someone who's been on my radar lately because I've been disappointed. I had higher hopes for you when you came up and you haven't really lived up to them. And then I look at Phoenix here and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, dude, like at $7,800, he needs to be almost a core pick for us in DFS, almost regardless where he starts, to be honest.
Yeah, because this is one of Briscoe's best tracks in the Cup Series. I don't think there's any other track on the schedule where Briscoe's even scored 3 top 10 finishes at a track in the Cup Series other than Phoenix. So, and it's also the only track where he's actually got a Cup win. So let's not forget about that. And I think your dog agrees here. Is that right, Rich?
Yeah, Rocco is a big race fan. He doesn't know it all the time, but he loves when the racing game's on and the TV. He does watch TV. It's kind of interesting. But no, he agrees with you on Briscoe. Look, I'll be honest, man. A lot of these mid-tier picks are quite interesting. And the one I really wanted to talk to you about is, we got him kind of in reverse order here, but I would love to talk to you about Josh Berry, because his record here, he didn't run trucks, but you go back and look at Xfinity. His record here isn't exactly great. It's okay in the Xfinity series, However, Kevin Harvick was absolutely dominant in this car. And even though he wasn't as dominant in this car, I don't know if he had a win in this car because we only had 2 years with it here at Phoenix. But he still rattled off top 5s and top 10s. We know this team. Look, he's Chase Briscoe's teammate. So something the team has kind of found, right, for Briscoe, because maybe there's something that Briscoe took to that Harvick did or something. But clearly between the 4 and 14, they have found speed at this track. I'm a little nervous on Barry, though, because driver history-wise, I kind of was like, meh.
But even so, there is a couple factors to consider. You mentioned his Xfinity history. He has 3 top 10 finishes and 5 Xfinity Series starts, with his best finish being 3rd. That's already pretty solid enough. He's driving in the 4 car that Kevin Harvick used to dominate this place with. And you have to remember, within the March Phoenix race last year, Harvick arguably had the best car and was in position to win if the cautions just flew a different way. Harvick was just really in position. He was really strong within that race, and Josh Berry is driving that same car with the same crew chief. So that already is something that we have to really keep in mind with why we like Josh Berry. But there's one more thing that you haven't mentioned, Rich, that also is kind of important to note too. This is not Josh Berry's first time in a Cup car at Phoenix. He actually was in this exact race last year, substituting for Chase Elliott. And he
saw that.
Yeah. He started 17th, got the top 10.
And got 10th. And the sad thing is, in 3 races at Phoenix that Chase Elliott has been in this car, right? He hasn't even gotten the top 10. So, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say Barry's driving better than Elliott, but you get what I'm saying. Same equipment.
Oh, yeah.
Barry took it to a 10th. Chase hasn't yet. Now, granted, this was spring last year. 2 years ago was first year with the car. We've already seen a lot of craziness with the fall race. There's just a lot of data that doesn't match up. And some of that could just be it's the championship finale. Teams are probably taking swings that they wouldn't normally do if they're not in the championship. The championship cars are always the top 2, 3, 4, 5 cars, right? So all that stuff kind of plays into it. But I did forget about that he subbed for Elliott last year. And really, Barry, after about the 2nd or 3rd race that he subbed for Elliott, Barry really did start to come around. And that's the reason Stewart-Haas hired him.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And let's not also forget, Josh Berry comes from a short track modified racing background. So he's also got plenty of experience on short tracks. And this is the track that kind of fits his wheelhouse. It fits his driving style. So ultimately, there's just a lot of reasons, a lot of stats, a lot of facts that all point towards Josh Berry just being one of those drivers that you kind of have to really keep your eye on. And the thing is, not enough people are going to be talking about him.
No, I don't think he's going to be big on the radar. I really don't. So, and he's really priced on a DFS standpoint. He's almost in the value range. I mean, he's low enough at the mid-tier price that if you use him, you save some money and can go shopping elsewhere. So, speaking of short track drivers, is another one of those guys that are both in our list. Ty Gibbs. I mean, his whole upbringing was short track pavement, right? ARCA, the whole deal. And you've already mentioned Ty Gibbs a couple of times tonight because let's be honest, he's not the way he's priced and what his odds have been. He's discounted for where he's been performing.
Oh, definitely, for sure. Even though this history in a Cup car hasn't exactly been that favorable so far for Gibbs, this has been a really great track for him in Xfinity so far, where he has 1 win, a 2nd place finish, and a 6th place finish. And during that win, that was when he won the Xfinity Championship, led 125 laps there. And just, you have to keep in mind, that's Joe Gibbs Racing equipment. JGR is very good at this track as well. If you wanted to pick any of the Toyota teams in order to do well, I think relying on JGR is the way to go. And Ty Gibbs, he's in JGR equipment. He's done well at this track in other series, and he has a little bit more experience with him now in the next-gen car. So I think that there's actually some promise there in order to roster Gibbs this week.
So did you know, though, out of the last 4 Phoenix races, so since we've been in this new car, Joe Gibbs Racing has not had a top 5?
It's crazy to think. Very crazy to think.
Shocking, right? That surprised me. I don't think that holds. I think this new car makes a big difference in that regard. It was just one of those stats that I stumbled on that I was like, that's interesting. I never would have thought that, but just something to kind of keep in mind. Why don't you hit us with your last driver here?
Yes. This one's kind of more like a pick that can get you a solid finish. You don't expect this driver to win, but you do expect him in order to get a favorable result for the price, and that's Daniel Suarez, believe it or not. Since 2022, in the next gen car, he's had 2 finishes of 11th or better. In both of those finishes, he scored positive place differential. Although qualifying could swing me either way when it comes to Suarez, I think the finishes and the equipment is there, especially because he has that momentum from winning at Atlanta. So he knows that he's going to be feeling better about the cars and the team in general. They're gelling a little bit better. He's one driver that is going to be on my radar as somebody to watch, especially if he has the car in practice that'll allude towards a good finish.
With Ross's success here, I expect the car to be there. I was very torn on him as well. I pivoted a little bit. I went a little different direction. I don't disagree with your Suarez angle at all. I just went a little different direction. And it is kind of a gut shot, but I think he's priced low enough. And again, practice will change a lot of this for us. Sean and I cannot hit this home enough that practice will matter a lot, okay? If we see Brad Keselowski on a 10-lap average, 15-lap average back in 17th, that's not something I wanted to lean on. If we see Daniel Suarez in the top 7, I'm going to lean on that, right? So, but I'm looking at Brad Keselowski. He's had a decent, track history here. I'm more buying into the fact that our RFK is making a step this year. Buescher's been okay, but like I said, it's more of a gut shot than anything, Sean.
I think because it is RFK racing, you do have reason in order to kind of move on that gut shot a little bit, especially when you consider that Buescher ended up having some positive results since the next gen car with RFK. But I do think, though, that out of the two, I trust Buescher a little more than Keselowski, just because when you look towards the next gen history since 2022, his best finish was 15th. And that was within the last race at Phoenix in November, to be fair, but he just hasn't had many standout performances with this next gen car yet. So I'm not going to discount him entirely, because he does have the chance to surprise, and he's going to need to start putting some good runs together in order to make the playoffs. But I just think overall, he's not one of the first drivers that I'm going to be paying attention to.
So to your point, Buescher is priced higher than Keselowski, right? So the books, so to speak, agree with you. Where I'm coming from is I've been waiting to see speed from Brad outside of the plate races. And I feel like we saw it last weekend at Vegas. It didn't work out, but he was running up near the front for a good chunk of that event and showed speed. That's what I feel like RFK has been missing, has been the speed. And part of the reason I think we got to be careful looking at Brad's numbers with this new car, when he went over to RFK, he had to change a lot of things. I mean, they upgraded a ton of equipment from haulers to everything else, right? All the new went to Chris Buescher. Now that Chris Buescher is all loaded up, so to speak, locked and loaded, now some of the new cars, the new equipment, the new haulers, all that stuff is starting to float into Brad now, because he's the owner. So he's taking care of everybody first. And I can appreciate that. So, and I may be a little too ahead of the curve, but I'm pretty steadfast that RFK's got speed again, and be careful. Brad's going to be working his way there. And I may be leaning too much on what I saw last weekend at Vegas, but I think at that price point, look, it's going to be a contrarian play. He is not going to be high owned. I mean, you want to talk about throwing a dart in there that's less than 10% or 7% owned, it's going to be Brad Keselowski.
I do like the angle where you can call him a contrarian play, because I think that fits him perfectly this week. But if we're going to say, I'm just going to do a little advanced tease, but it would not shock me that on next week's show, when we cover Bristol, we might be talking about him in a much more favorable light then.
Look, we're going to learn a lot this weekend, Sean, between the Toyota 4 changes, the changes for all the 3 teams, the fact this is the first short track race of the year. There's been a lot of info and stuff we can learn from the first 3 because Daytona and Atlanta, similar. That gives us some idea of where the teams are at in general. We got real track racing last week, and again, kind of shows us who's got speed. Joey Logano had plenty of speed. We should not be sleeping on him. These finishes are going to get better for him. It's going to happen. I was talking to Kiowa in the chat, and he's like, he likes to predict stocks and uses graphs and kind of trends, right? And it's like, well, I'm afraid to use this guy. It feels like, the wheels are about to fall off. They've had too many top 5s, that sort of thing. And I said, that's fair, but I actually like to think on the opposite side. I want to find the guy whose speed is there, who hasn't had the finish. The Joey Logano's, the Christopher Bells, the Brad Keselowski's to a degree. These are the guys I want to start betting on now or start looking at, because they're not going to tell us when they're going to pop and win. Just like you were saying earlier, those 45-1 and 80-1 bets, guess what, guys? Those are a done deal now. That is not happening. So once these guys catch fire, it's too late. We need to be on the wagon, so to speak, before that happens. And those are names that we're going to be talking about. And so I think we're going to be coming around. And, really, Josh Berry falls kind of in that same range. He's been a great value play if you look for him, and it hasn't worked out. But as we go through the year here, he's going to be. If you're going to get away with spending $7,200 on him or $69 or whatever it is, that's cheap for a guy that is on a team that has the same crew chief and a lot of the same crew members that won a championship with Kevin Harvick.
For sure. And you remember, Harvick, if the race circumstances played out differently, we could have been talking about him as the race winner that day instead of William Byron.
I wish we would have. That was really unfortunate. It didn't work out that way last year, but such is life, right? So let's talk about some of the sleeper and bargain guys, because I tell you what, I am shocked that I have this guy and you don't have him. I am shocked.
So why don't we get into that driver now, since you're already teasing him?
Well, it's funny because your first one, well, I almost went with your first one as well. And then after I went digging into Xfinity and truck data, I pivoted. Noah Gragson has had quite a record run here. I mean, quite the success here between trucks and Xfinity. I was somewhat shocked, especially his Xfinity number. So, and I go back to, I buy into teams and stuff like that. Noah Gragson's the teammate to Chase Briscoe, we've already talked about. Teammate to Josh Berry, who we've already talked about. So I'm looking at Noah Gragson as, wow, his Xfinity history is pretty stinking good. He's teammates to guys that clearly have this place kind of figured out. He's one of the cheapest guys on the slate, man. I don't know if I can do a lineup and not have Noah Gragson in it.
I'm just going to tell you, but if I was able to think about 5 drivers for my list, he would have been the 5th. I'm just going to tell you right there. It's just I ran out of slots, and there was just some drivers I think needed a little bit more notice and attention than Gragson for this week, just because when it comes to Gragson, even though the Xfinity history is there, he's also won in the Xfinity series at Phoenix before. I'm still kind of in a bit of a wait and see to see where he qualifies and where he goes in practice, because that's going to affect my DFS outlook on him heavily.
So let me ask you this, because why don't you talk about your first guy then? Because he's a teammate. What had you lean his way versus Gragson as far as wait to see versus not wait to see?
For context, the driver that Rich is asking me about is Ryan Preece. Teammate at Stewart-Haas Racing, but ultimately I like Preece a little bit more just because he has more of a short track racing background, and he also has some experience with this particular car at Phoenix, whereas Gragson, his only experience with this car was a Legacy Motor Club Chevy that, let's be real, did not have the equipment last year. So I trust Ryan Preece a little bit more, and also just because he's ran a little bit better and has just a little bit more experience with this Cup car compared to Gragson. And you look back towards Preece's 2 finishes last year, both of them inside the top 15. Finished 14th in the November race and finished 12th in the March race last season, where he also scored positive place differential. I just ultimately trust Priest a little bit more based on the history and experience, but that's not to say that Gragson won't be a good play. In fact, I have some confidence that Gragson could be a sneaky sleeper play out there, just like all the other Stewart-Haas racing cars. I think if there's any lesson to be learned here from us talking about these drivers, you have to watch Stewart-Haas racing this week.
Sean, we talk about all the teams matter, right? When we go to Martinsville, I'm going to be on Hendrick Motorsports. Okay. They have a storied history there. They have tragedy there. There's a whole lot that goes with it. But you can talk to drivers in the garage and they'll be like, well, Hendrick they have something figured out in Martinsville, and they shared some of that with Stewart-Haas back in the day. Somebody took info there. Kurt Busch talked about can't beat them, join them, and all that. So I'm with you. And look, I was very close to listing Priest. In fact, I had him typed up 3 different times in my list here, Sean, and I decided to change it and go elsewhere. So I'm with you.
Yeah. In fact, I think it's valid either way.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about Austin Dillon, though? Because that one I want to get in on. He has shown speed. His teammates been fast. I think Kyle Busch has raised the level of the whole team. I can't get there, though, man. Sell me on it.
So ultimately, when it comes to Austin Dillon, he's not a driver that you expect in order to set the world on fire at Phoenix, especially when he's only scored about 2 top 10 finishes in his entire Cup career at Phoenix. But where I'd see the value with Dillon is the fact that he knows how to gain positions and finish there, especially when you look back towards the last 5 races. 4 finishes with positive place differential with 3 top 15 finishes. If Dillon qualifies at around, say, 20th or 22nd or so, he's going to be on my radar for sure, just because the history points towards the fact that he's going to be able to climb up there and compete for a top 15. He's not going to be able to have that sort of same level of talent as Kyle Busch has. We all know that. But what Austin Dillon is going to have, he's going to be a solid enough driver, and he's going to be one of those drivers that people aren't paying enough attention to in order to be a sneaky play. And I trust that more than, say, Noah Gragson, who doesn't have the experience or the results in order to prove that. Dillon, in my opinion, he has proven that, and he can be able to compete for a top 15.
That's fair. I mean, like I said, I really didn't need to be sold on it. I was really close to, price. We talk about it all the time. With this group of drivers, price, qualifying position, and ownership are really the biggest dictators on where you go. You got to have enough money to get the guys you want, right? You want to leave $300, $400, $500 on the bench, so to speak. No big deal, right? So whatever money you have or can use, and that's also why I oftentimes will find my favorite value guys based on, I think he's underpriced, qualifying position, practice speeds. I often build lineups with one of my value guys in the lineup as far as part of my first build, right? Like I want the dominator and I want my best value guy, and that kind of is how I start the build of my lineups. So I'm with you. This whole group, we're both on John Hunter Nemechek for obvious reasons. Right. You can talk about that a little bit. I'll be honest, Sean, Austin Cindric is more a gut shot play because I have faith in both Logano and Blaney's history, Team Penske's history, how Blaney has run well here. I'm banking on his price and being a teammate. But John Hunter kind of speaks for himself. So why don't you give us kind of a little rundown on JHN?
So, John Hunter Nemechek driving for Legacy Motor Club this year. My main reason for having such an interest in him does stem from his Xfinity history, which is very, very good.
It's impressive.
In fact, actually, the only thing that isn't impressive about it is the fact that he's never won in the Xfinity Series at Phoenix. But that's not for lack of trying, because he's come close on several occasions. 7 starts there in the Xfinity Series, 6 top 10 finishes, and he's led in 5 of those 7 races there overall. Legacy Motor Club, you have to just think about the equipment is overall pretty solid, I'd say, for the price. And if Nemechek ends up qualifying fairly deep in the field, but has a car that looks to be capable of moving up through practice, going to be all over that with him.
The only way it'll get tough is, say he qualifies inside the top 15. It's going to be an interesting decision because he's probably going to be a little more contrarian of a play just because of his price point. Someone's probably going to look and say, well, I can save $200, go further back in the pack, have a shot at higher place differential. So qualifying will be huge, or if you want to go contrarian. I'm very interested to see how they run because Eric Jones has not historically run well here. So I'm very curious to see the practice times between the two cars. I fear that Legacy is going to be better at the tracks where, in the past anyway, that not John Hunter, Eric Jones has run well at, because I feel like the team notes carried over a little bit better. So I'm curious. John Hunter is going to be running the Xfinity. He's going to have some extra seat time. It wouldn't shock me to see him win both races, to be honest with you. Winning the Cup race would be kind of shocking. I wouldn't be shocked to see him.
The Cup. Well,
No.
Xfinity,
Xfinity, yeah. I would not be shocked to see him win Xfinity. Cup, I guess what I should say is I won't be shocked to see him run top 10 in Cup, right? If he scored a top 5, it wouldn't be shocking to me. I'm not expecting it, but it wouldn't be shocking to me. Like I said, Austin Cindric, there's not a lot of history to really lean on, although his Xfinity in history is pretty good too. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick, because that is something that shocked me. His Cup history is not good. The only thing he's really done well in this car in the Cup Series has been the plate races.
And road courses to a degree.
Oh, yeah, you're right. He's done very well at the road courses. I forgot about that. Because he got to win at one too, didn't he? But at Phoenix, in 8 starts in the Xfinity Series, Austin Cindric has 7 top 10s, 5 top 5s, and 2 wins. I don't know how many people.
Looking at it here too, he's also led in about 6 of those 8 events as well.
Right. So I don't know how many people are going to be on him, Sean, because his Cup history hasn't been great here. But I'm willing to take a gamble on his price, man.
Me personally, I'm on a wait and see approach with Cindric here because he does have the. Let's not kid ourselves. Team Penske is one of the best teams to drive for when it comes to Phoenix. My whole thing is that Cindric has just been so inconsistent at this track at the Cup level, though, that I need to see a little bit of data before I'm fully sold on it.
Fair enough. Honestly, our last 2 picks, I could easily go with yours. Mine is kind of out in left field. What happened was I saw his price was so low, and I don't expect him to qualify well. And I went and looked at his past history and was kind of shocked at how good his past history was, specifically in the Xfinity Series. I threw Daniel Hemric in this group. And look, it'll be a wait and see, Sean. Don't get me wrong. But he is one of the lowest priced drivers on the slate. I think he's the 2nd or 3rd lowest priced. And he's been decent this year for Rick Ware Colleague. He's been good this year for Colleague Racing. I'm willing to. I think Daniel Hemric's 5,200. Is that what I saw the price as? 6,200.
5,200 is Derek Kraus, who's also driving in the 16, I think.
Oh, maybe I got the 2 confused there. Let me look real quick. I need a bigger monitor, Sean, because I need more tabs and stuff. I've got to get something set up that's better than this.
But while you're going forth and doing that, though, let me bring up Hemric's past finishes here in the Cup Series, because he has 3 Cup starts at Phoenix. Overall, his best finish was 17th, and that was in a substitution role for 2311 Racing all the way back in 2022, which was his only start in the next-gen car at Phoenix. That's his best finish, 17th. He has only one other top 20 finish, which was an 18th in his first Phoenix start driving for RCR back in 2019. He only has one finish with positive place differential, which was his 21st place finish, his worst of his 3 finishes in November 2019. So Hemric, he's a driver that I think if he qualifies deep in the field, I'm going to really like to use him. But if he ends up qualifying, say, around 15th or so, I am not going to be looking to use him.
He's not usable because what you're hoping for from Hemric is a 10 or 15th place finish. That's his ceiling. Okay. That's anything inside the top 10 would be shocking. Okay. So between 10 and 15 is what your best goal hope for is. I expect him to qualify near the back. If he doesn't, he's off the board. But he has $5,600. There's 4 drivers that are cheaper than him. Kraus is one. Kraus would be an interesting name to keep in mind. Kaz Gralla is the cheapest. Justin Haley's ahead of Gross, and oh, poor Harrison Burton. Man, I don't know what to do with that guy right now. But it was just something interesting because I was shocked, like I said, at his Xfinity stuff. But, you know, if we want to talk about true talent, give me your guy, Carson Hocevar, man.
Oh, yeah. Carson Hocevar, he's the driver that is rounding out my list of drivers to watch when it comes to the value picks. He's priced at $6,000 on DraftKings. Overall, for the price and considering the potential that he has, he's ran pretty good at this track in the Truck Series. He does have one Cup Series start where he ended up finishing 19th. I think considering that it's Spire Motorsports equipment and it's about on that same level, if not better than the Legacy Motor Club equipment that he did in his one particular Cup start, I have to like Carson Hocevar, especially for a top 15 finish, that he could at least get you there. And if he ends up qualifying below the top 20 or so, get me that. Get me Carson Hocevar in my lineups then.
I have a lot of faith in the guy the rest of the year, so I'm with you. Look, I praised Hocevar all year in the Truck Series articles last year, so I'm with you, Sean. I'm all in. Let's jump into our core 4 bet winners. What do you say? And I got to tell you, I think you should be mad, man. I think you should be mad at Vegas. Break this down for us.
So overall, when it comes to my core 4 betting winners, I'm just going to flat out go through all 4 of my drivers at once here because we did all talk about it when we were going through the DFS segments, but it's Ryan Blaney at plus 650, William Byron at plus 700, Ross Chastain at plus 900, and then this one's my long shot bet, the one with the deep odds, Josh Berry at plus 7,000. Overall, I mean, none of these guys are the betting favorite. In fact, Kyle Larson is the betting favorite currently as of this recording here. So, or as of the show, I should say. But Blaney, he's the driver to beat. Byron has a pretty good chance to go toe-to-toe with him. Chastain, I'd like the odds at plus 900. And then Berry, as we mentioned, so many factors are just pointing to the fact that he's going to have more than likely a pretty good run at this track. So plus 7,000, I would definitely taking a shot at that there.
I almost listed Barry as well. I'll be the guy to say it then. I think Vegas odds are wrong on this one. I feel like every week we keep finding where the odds are just wrong. We've been lucky that they've turned into winners a couple of times. I'm not quite there with Josh Berry. Sean is selling me on it, and I'm getting there. But it is worth one of those $1 bets at plus 7,000 because we may see after practice and qualifying that changes to plus 2,000 to 3,000. Probably not 2,000, probably closer to 3,000 to 4,000. But I do like that as a long shot bet. Look, we overlap a ton. I also don't have the favorite listed. You guys know my stance on that. The risk reward. And I'm telling you, if we did a study on how many of the top favorites actually won, I think you'd be shocked at how low that number is. If you want to look at the top 5 drivers listed, it's probably a very high number. But if you look at just the number 1 driver listed, that's why, I'll go with the favorite at plus 500, plus 450, somewhere in that range. But once you start getting into that 300, 3-1, 2-1 range, Sean, I just can't swallow that pill. It's too juicy for me. I have seen way too many races where the best car just finishes 5th because of a bullshit penalty, some bad pit stop, some idiot crashes with 2 laps to go, caution comes out the wrong time. There's been so much fluky stuff, right? But I'm right with you on Blaney, Byron, and Chastain. Boom. My other one is, and it's not really a long shot, but I'm back on Reddick at 1,400. Third the last 2 years here. Just something to watch. I really do like the Barry pick for a top 5 at plus 800, though. At 8-1 to get a top 5, I do think that's worth, $2 to $3 bet.
I think that there's potential there in the top 5 bet, of course. I just think that Barry, he's one of those drivers that really the circumstances can go in his favor as it is overall. And as for your Reddick pick, I don't mind that too. I would actually consider taking a shot on that as well, especially for those odds.
Well, I mean, to your point on Barry, there's nobody with those odds and I agree with you, that has the equipment in a scenario where I could see them winning. That was kind of my point on Suarez. That was my point on Carruth, right? And this is your point on Barry. we know that to your point, that car could have won the race last time. Barry's not Kevin Harvick. We get that. He doesn't have to be Kevin Harvick to still be fast. So let's get into our DFS picks. And I actually got FanDuel going. I'm on the FanDuel train here, Sean, so I didn't leave it hanging.
Nice.
So hit me with your DK picks.
All right. So when it comes to my core 4 picks, I'm going to be talking about both my DraftKings and FanDuel picks here because ultimately it's pretty similar other than just one driver difference. But my first core 4 DFS play I have my top priced favorites is Ryan Blaney, 11,200 on DraftKings, 13,500 on FanDuel. After that is Ross Chastain, 9,000 on DraftKings, 12,000 on FanDuel, especially like the price on DraftKings for him. Then after that, kind of like my mid-tier core 4 option is Chase Briscoe at 7,800 on DraftKings and 8,000 on FanDuel. And then here's where we're going to have a little bit of a division between my core 4 picks because my last driver for DraftKings and FanDuel is different. For DraftKings, it's Ryan Preece at 6,900. And then for FanDuel, it's Josh Berry at 6,200. My main reasoning for the different choices there simply comes down to price. Preece is the cheaper driver on DraftKings. Berry's the cheaper driver on FanDuel. Ultimately, I like both of those drivers in order to round it out as a value pick. Take your pick there, right there, and let's see what you got there, Rich.
So I just realized for some reason I have my 4th one in there, so I'm looking at a lineup I did where I did have them in there. We overlap on Ryan Blaney. I can't get away from him. He's not the highest priced guy. He's one of the highest priced guys, but I can't get away from him. I can't get away from Chase Briscoe. Those two are both in my DK and FanDuel lineups. I'm trying to see because I made some notes here, but I left someone out. On DraftKings, I did throw Noah Gragson in. I like his price at 6,600. It's hard for me to, kind of get away from that. My other pick here. Oh, no, I left him out. I did 3 guys. I apologize. Somewhere I can't do math, apparently, because
I did a lineup 3 this week.
Apparently. Well, I've been doing that in the Discord because I'm trying something with it, right? But the lineup I did one, and I had Blaney, I had Briscoe, I know who it was. Hemrick at 5,600. Again, that was based on I think he'll qualify in the back. Now, if you do something like that, okay, that leaves you an average of $9,400 per driver. That means you could go ahead and throw William Byron in and still get someone like a Bubba Wallace, a Daniel Suarez that Sean likes, a Josh Berry that Sean likes, or you could get away from Byron and go with, say, a Kyle Busch and Joey Logano. So the reason I kind of liked that build the way I did it was I felt like it left a lot of options to still chase some high-end guys, 2 of them even, or gamble a little bit on a lower level and really swing for the fences and maybe make another change elsewhere. On FanDuel, like I said, Blaney overlapped, Briscoe overlapped. John Hunter is only $4,500 on FanDuel. I can't get away from that price on FanDuel. My other core over there was Kyle Busch. Part of what played into that for me is Sean, as you noted, brought up the you get credit for laps finished. I fully expect Kyle Busch to finish laps. I felt like his price point was reasonable. And again, it left you a ton of options to go with other avenues. Like you could still throw a Byron in here in this FanDuel lineup because John Hunter's so cheap and go a different direction on someone else as well. So that's where I'm at. And look, I don't know how we can make it clear. Get in the Discord, go to Fantasy Guru, sign up. This stuff is going to change. Sean and I are doing this blind. Like I take a lot of pride in how well we pick. The problem is they start to be too good and they qualify too well. Like the wife hears me all the time. Let me guess, your guys qualified too well. Yes, I like the money. I like the speed, but darn it, they had a good qualifying run. So that'll swing things, especially on your value tiers. What are your thoughts, Sean?
Yeah, practice and qualifying, it's going to change a lot of things with our thoughts on this. We may have our thoughts as it is right now with liking some of these drivers in order to finish where we expect them to finish, but then they could just have a poor car in practice, end up qualifying in the back, and then they could just become a driver that we don't expect in order to win, but just have maybe a decent or solid finish. And then from there, we have to kind of play around with the lineups.
Well, for sure. I mean, prime example, right? Zane Smith and Carson Hocevar last week. Okay. I believe you did too, but I know I recommended Zane Smith. The reason I recommended Zane Smith, I felt like both of them could finish similarly within, 3, 4, 5 spots of each other. Zane Smith, though, qualified 10 spots further back. So from a points gaining perspective, it was about $200 difference in drivers. So one in the same. One had a much higher potential, in my opinion, to gain some bonus points or gain ahead of the other. There was a cushion built in. Fortunately, Zane Smith cut a tire right away, and we never got to see it because Zane has quite the impressive record at Vegas. We were really excited to see it. Hocevar ran where he qualified. So you got a good finish out of Hocevar. He was a smarter play per se because he scored more points than Zane Smith because Zane didn't finish well. However, if Zane does finish about where Hocevar does, you're gaining about 8 to 10 points with Zane Smith than you would have had over Hocevar, even though they both finished right around the same spot. So that's where I was saying earlier about keeping perspective, points scoring versus trying to predict where they finish. If you've got guys that are similar, what we think as far as, or you even think as far as expectations, be smart. Take the place differentials. Take the guy on the team that you know has a faster car or has faster teammates. Things like that. You got to leverage these different angles to really maximize.
Exactly. You have to kind of just know the field per se and manage your expectations in check and just look at the data, then make the call.
Well, I'm excited because we got practice. Sean, I was so excited to see 10, 15, 20 lap average times, man. And it wasn't just one or two drivers. We had 15, 16, 17. Like, we finally got a good view. This was like 2018 all over again, man. Like, oh, I as much as I gripe at NASCAR, I need to send them a thank you letter. I really do, because without practice, in my opinion, betting in DFS is not as fun.
It isn't. No, you are definitely right about that. And you know what? You mentioned about the 20 lap averages. I think we're going to maybe even touch upon 30 this week.
Oh, it's
I
totally
think we are.
plausible. It's totally plausible. And folks, keep in mind, a long green flag run here isn't, at Daytona, I think it was, 30 to 40 laps they were saying? 37, 38, I think it was. Here, you're talking more like 60 laps, 70 laps. So it's going to be interesting. And look, we may see shorter, because of the tire fall off, Sean, we may see shorter runs. Like, it wouldn't shock me if the tire fall off was ahead of the fuel mileage, right? Because we know they don't want to stick around for taking fuel anyway. Wear out those tires, short pit, come in, pack it full of fuel, and get going. That's what I'm hoping we see.
It's going to be pretty interesting to see because fuel strategy did play into this race last year. So
yes, it did. Yes, it did.
We can't forget about it.
Well, I think that's all we got, Sean, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think we should close this out, put it in the garage, and then get ourselves prepped up for race day. Get our DFS engines and betting engines prepped up.
And I apologize. It did run long today. I thought we had some great discussion to start the show, though. So thank you. Kudos for listening. I'll be better about trying to get us time down. The timing is on me, folks. Don't you dare get it mad at Sean. It's on me. But hey, go to fantasyguru.com. Game time MVP plan. Game time for the coupon code. $50, 12 months. All our racing, look, I'll be frank. Our racing stuff's worth the $50 a year, man. And this will get you all of this year and the start of next year too. Okay. But then you also get Finsty stuff. You get, man, Scott's and Chris and Arn. I mean, NHL, NBA, Patio Joe's on that stuff. MMA, PGA, soccer, horse racing, other race. I think Sean and I are going to be talking Indy at some point here. Kind of sounds that way. Just throwing out that little teaser as a Indy 500, I don't know, aficionado, since I went for so many years and decades. But we'll have some of that. Go to fantasyguru.com. Game time for the code. On behalf of Sean Engel, I'm Rich Maletto. Thanks for tuning in to Race Guru Thunder Hour. Until next